people are going to do what they want with the laws. It's apparent. We live in one of the harshest states in the country for marijuana laws, and people risk felonies all the time. The prisons are full with people, for marijuana violations, previous to medical marijuana, during medical marijuana, after medical marijuana. I don't think that, we could argue about which models will be most effective, MPP's model or our model. And I think it's really going to come down to, it's a consumer-dictated market. That's one of the things that I learned working in dispensaries, is that we can all look at this as a business, a product, like just a regular commodity. And I don't think that it is. I think it has intrinsic value kind of to people. I think it's a little more than that. I think it's more than a box of cereal that you can market, brand, make a slogan for, crunch the numbers and run it like a retail model. Black market is an existing market. It comes with its own culture, etiquette, norms. So it would make sense that if we want to transition a market into a legal market, that we would bring a model that most closely represents what they're used to now, the black market. Because that's what we want to do. That's, in the titles of the initiatives, they state what their intent is, and it's to reclaim distribution or to take distribution away from the illegal markets. To do that, we need market participation. So it would make sense to put a model in place that most closely resembles what we have now. If we put something that's just completely different, completely new, the consumer's not familiar with it, and I see that in medical marijuana, not familiar with it. Going into medical marijuana from the black market as people transition, I've seen them become very uncomfortable coming into the dispensaries. It was a new thing, it was very novel.
And illegal.
Yeah.
Jason, may I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What my understanding is that the difference between the MPP initiative and the AZMR is that the main difference is the amount of marijuana that you're able to carry with you. And that's why I am someone who says it's basically the black market that is fighting the marijuana policy project at this point. I have asked, a lot of folks have asked me to watch the Evergreen film from Washington. What I've deducted is it seems the ACLU wrote that initiative, that were the folks that ended up passing the bill there in Washington. And the community fought back because of the same issues, that they said, well, we've got it fine just now, why would we need to legalize it? And that's what I see the AZMR as right now. What I've seen are so many seniors that are scared to death to try something as long as it's illegal. And what I'd like to see is something have a label on it that says legal. I don't want anybody to get arrested.
Right.
I don't want any of my friends that have been providing us that black market service to get arrested ever. But I understand that there are limits when it comes to legislation. And I don't want those folks that have carried the black market to stand in the way of the majority of Arizonans that just want to see the substance be legal.
Right. So you would like the people that know the least about it to make the decisions for the people that have been doing it for years. It would be like asking somebody who doesn't work on a car to come tell you how to work on your car.
I think everybody needs their car serviced.
Right.
Everybody needs their car serviced, whether they know a good mechanic or not.
Right.
So I want everybody to get the same good service.
Let me address a few points before we go any further. So, as far as the black market and the possession amounts that you can have, have you all this talk about the black market?
What amount?
A lot of folks talk about, well, the cartels. This is going to stop the cartels and all this. Has anybody here worked for a cartel or did CPA work for them, or do you have any numbers outside of law enforcement numbers and statistics to really know anything about
Actually working for
anything
normal?
about the black market actually being involved in
I
it?
do, yes.
Yeah.
I worked in the California
yeah.
brokers
Okay.
for a long time.
Cool. So
and
would
I
you
know
drive all the way to California and pour 8 ounces?
I wouldn't have to. because
What
they'll
is
bring it
8
here.
ounces? So is 8 ounces a number that you would you say, in your opinion, is that a common number?
To transport around?
Yeah.
To have my house, yes.
Right.
Transport around, no.
Right. So we're talking about the black market. These guys are dealing in large volumes. 8 ounces is nothing. It sounds like a lot to the average consumer.
Right.
Like Kathy's saying, the older demographic, it sounds like a lot.
Right.
And then again, I go back to the knowledge of the product and you know how much it takes to medicate somebody or to sustain an uninterrupted supply. 8 ounces really isn't that much in reality. No. It's more of a fear factor thing, like Kathy was saying.
Jason, we do have to. I don't want to cut it off because I know everybody's so interested.
Yeah.
And I'm just glad to
on
actually meet you.
all.
No, I'm glad you did. It's nice. I know we have. Yeah, Michael, did you have a?
I had asked him to speak, and I put Mike Templeton on the spot, and both of them did a really good job, I felt, of representing the issues that they were working on. Does anybody else have a campaign that they're already working on that they know about that we ought to hear about and get laid out?
Well, I have a different question for you.
Okay.
So you talked about the hemp initiative earlier, about it not being sponsored or being funded.
Funded, right.
If you're out there collecting for MPP, are you also collecting for the hemp initiative? And if not, why?
I collected signatures for the hemp initiative earlier, and wasn't provided with additional pages. Was provided with they weren't holding up their end of the campaign. Where, like, I have people who are volunteering under me for MPP, and I took documentation on them. I call them up on a regular basis. I try to be sure that they have what they need to continue advancing. These are like the basic rudiments of making a campaign. And having been ignored by campaigns, having run a campaign myself, I think that there's a minimum standard of professionalism that is going to be necessary for things to accomplish. And you can only get people to invest so far. They don't feel like they're getting met with professionals.
So it sounds like you were collecting while you had the initiative, but you're not getting any response from them.
Right.
They're not funded. I mean,
well, they had some internal turmoil. Their campaign manager left. There was conflict in his leaving. So I also collected petition signatures for the medical marijuana initiative out of Apache Junction. They provided me with 3 pages. I gave 1 page to a volunteer who's in Apache Junction. And as far as I know, she filled up a page and then they hadn't responded to her. So, and they haven't responded to me. So.
That little gal.
Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify, when you say you are collecting petition signatures for MPP, you are collecting for that initiative on your own as a volunteer.
Right. That is very accurate.
Thank you.
Of these initiatives.
You know, and just this time,
Since I got
there's nobody in the state that works as hard as this guy doing that. That's right. Yes.
There's a spot on here. Yes, give her a great big hand.
Not just her.
And $100 bills, thick stacks, and we'll keep working.
Why wouldn't you get
Amazing.
money for signatures if they're giving money out?
Why don't I get money for? Because I didn't want to confuse the volunteer issue with paid petition gatherers. In politics,
Sure, if they have fun.
well, I'm answering your question.
Money.
We're saving the campaign money where we could use.
Here, let me answer your question.
Okay, go ahead.
In politics, campaigns, both candidates and initiatives, will use paid signature gatherers to create a base, and these paid signature gatherers typically are employees by their commission employees. Their job is not to be a political advocate; it's to get registered voters to sign on the line. And I don't know if you've ever been approached by a person like that. I appreciate their work, but it's not the same as volunteerism. This issue, to be successful, especially in the rural part of the states where I'm from, has to be something that people carry like a fire. And if it's just the people who are getting paid, then we won't have that fire igniting. My vision of what I try to do as a helper in MPP is to create a statewide volunteer thing. Like up in Mojave County, I have people who are collecting signatures. Down in Tucson, I have people who are collecting signatures. Just without in Prescott, got people who are collecting signatures. These guys are on fire for themselves, and everybody that they talk to, their personal witness is getting folks ignited, getting excited. And places like Yavapai County, with Sheila Pope being our nemesis working so hard, it's very important for folks to have their voice themselves and not expect that it's somebody being paid is going to carry it for them. We suffer in our country from too much apathy, and everybody expects that it's, you know, somebody's paid is going to do it. I have spent my adult life trying to be an inspirational figure on various issues, so it makes absolute sense that I do this. Now, you know, certainly I want people to give me money. I don't want to starve to death. We almost lost our house last year for my congressional campaign because of the same, you know, operating procedure. But you know, I get this life to ride, and I want it to be about something more than just the dollars in my pocket.
Thank you, Michael.
So, one of the things that Kathy introduced, and I've done a pretty good job of putting people on the spot without their expectation tonight. She mentioned the history of the community.
Yes.
And we have a person here who had been pretty significant and normal in Arizona for decades. I'm talking about Chuck Hadd. When I was like, yeah.
Chuck.
When I was a little kid watching, you know, America on TV in the 60s, he was actually in Vietnam fighting for us. And then came back and has been fighting for issues ever since. Chuck, would you be willing to talk a little bit about your period of being leadership in 90s normal?
Well,
but over here where we can get it on the camera.
I don't really want to be on camera.
Oh.
That's
Okay.
But, I, along with several others, were the founders of the first normal chapter in this state in 1990. And we, if anybody wants, we put out a newsletter, which I have on a flash drive, if anybody would care to borrow it. We did run a signature drive to put legalization on the ballot in 1992. Arizona became the first state to pass a medical marijuana act in 96, 20 minutes before California. Our legislature at that time was able to overturn that. We came back, not just us, but the people, came back in 98 with the Voter Initiative Protection Act, so that any initiative now can't be altered by the legislature.
Marijuana did that.
That's right.
We also had one of our leaders put in jail, convicted of, they came up with this lame, in the 90s the legislature came up with this Marijuana Stamp Act, which is obviously a legal fiction, and so let's test it. And our Peter Wilson, our chairman at the time, was arrested under the statute, and his charge was dismissed. But they went after him, and eventually were able to nail him. But what the initial judge said is, well, if he has a stamp, and he's stamping everything he sells, it's legal as far as the JP. It was right around then that they decided that they tightened up the laws. What other highlights?
Of note, in that trial, Peter Wilson they pulled out evidence to convict him. Like, here's evidence, look, jury, and had his tax stamp on it. They stopped the trial, took the stamp off, and then continued to show it to the jury so they weren't going to be distracted by the stamp.
Yeah, so he got really screwed, as it were. His lawyer was advising him to just take the plea, of course. He wanted right at trial. He misunderstood and thought that, you know, at a trial I get to defend myself. That's not how they work at a trial or on trial. And at any rate, well, that's been our most significant things, those 3 bumps. Now, we did a lot of things throughout the 90s. We were the only game in town, as it were, so whenever there was something happening in Tucson, that was us. Whenever there was something happening in Flagstaff, that was us. We used to do things too, like we had this kind of guerrilla war game. Like whenever there was a concert, we would go out and notice who the undercover agents were. And we had our little bullhorns, and we would tell people, hey, this guy's a cop. Let's all give him a hand for being able to protect us. We want everybody to, and they really hated us.
Yeah.
And they threatened us. They would threaten us. They would threaten us. The rest is for what? And they didn't like it.
I appreciate you taking that time to do that for us. And I appreciate you guys listening to this part also, because folks think that they're reinventing the wheel all the time. But actually, this has been a battle that's been going on since the 1930s, right? This has been a battle that,
Since marijuana was illegal.
since it was made illegal, people have been trying to fix this. I take inspiration up in Kingman, where we lived in 2010. We weren't paying attention to the internal politics of the AMMA campaign. We were looking at, is marijuana legalization going to change in our state? And it did, and people got happier and better. And you know, when I was 18, teen runaway, and that cop was shining the light in my face, the first time I smoked, my life was threatened, destroyed, the very first time I smoked. And America has moved so far from that point. So, yeah, I think that we have the power to keep moving it. And that's why we're here with these kinds of meetings.
That's right, Michael.
That's right.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, folks, for listening, for sitting in. Thank you, Michael, for your service to Arizona. Is there anyone else want to say anything? We have no time left, but
I want to mention that there is a chapter in Tucson now, AZ for Normal.
there certainly is.
Which
They
is
have kept
actually
the
the
candle
original
burning since the
normal.
90s.
After a lot of us got jailed or burned out, the members got moved to Tucson. And they meet on the, what, second Saturday of